2019 implementation of a juvenile detention and youth rehabilitation center to be moved by the Leader of Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown North.
I recognize the Leader of the Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown North.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move private member motion number 1 of 2019, implementation of a juvenile detention and youth rehabilitation center, which reads as follows. Whereas it is acknowledged that there are juveniles within the Cayman Islands who habitually commit crimes, and whereas it is also acknowledged that there is a handful of violent juveniles who commit serious crimes, and whereas it is nearly universally recognized that juveniles who commit minor offenses should be not subject to harsher components of the adult criminal justice system, and whereas in prosecution, discretion, or concurrent jurisdiction law, there's a class of cases regarding youth that should be brought before a juvenile court, and whereas there is no local juvenile rehabilitation program to prevent and help or young offenders from repeating or doing crimes, and whereas the Cayman Islands have neither a proper juvenile detention or a youth rehabilitation center, and whereas there's a need for such a center which will help reduce the numbers of young offenders and provide the means to separate adult and young offenders and to help and improve the mental state of the youth in our country. Be it now further resolved that this Honorable Youth Parliament considers implementing a juvenile detention and a youth rehabilitation center for the youth of the Cayman Islands.
Private member's motion number 1 of 2019 has been duly moved. Is there a seconder to the motion? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second private member's motion number 1 of 2019.
The motion has been duly moved and seconded. Does the mover wish to speak to the bill?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me the privilege to speak in this honorable House. Madam Speaker, I rise to bring the motion presented that states that there should be an implementation of a juvenile detention center and youth rehabilitation center. Before I continue, I would like to ask the House if they actually know who consists of a child. In the Children Law 2012 revision, a child is a person who's up to the age of 18. However, the Penal Code 2018 revision directs that a person who has reached the age of 10 can be held criminally responsible. The legislated gaps create a real risk on children who fall between the ages of 10 and 17, because these children can be sent to prison. Yes, they can also be eligible to be sentenced to remand, namely the Bonaventure and Francis Borden Home. However, these facilities are not accurately equipped to house the juveniles through the entire rehabilitation process. Madam Speaker, I am not suggesting that the services being offered by Bonaventure and Francis Borden Home isn't working. It simply is not spread far enough. In fact, I most certainly commend that the Bonaventure and Francis Borden Home have played their part in doing some justice for our youth. But there is always room for improvement. Madam Speaker, this is where the world-famous, award-winning Missouri model plays a prevalent role. This model is an unconventional approach for dealing with the most hardened juvenile offenders and is producing incredible results with less money. The Missouri model covers all aspects of safety and positive transition, and as a country, we were all once behind this model until it was tragically shelved by the government in 2012. Madam Speaker, we broke ground. We spent $1.3 million. Do you know what I can do with $1.3 million? A lot, let me tell you that. And we had a plan. So let me ask you this. What is holding us back now? What is stopping us from moving forward? Why isn't this the most important priority for our youth? The answer to that is simply, it's absolutely nothing. Nothing is holding us back. Nothing is stopping us from moving forward, and nothing is more important than our youth. Madam Speaker, we can all agree that the youth of the Cayman Islands are our future, and I, for one, have had enough of the government not investing the majority of their time and energy into our youth. Our main focus shouldn't be on cruise ports, airports, or any other ports for that matter. Our main focus should be on our youth. Too many empty promises are made by the government that they will do this and that for our youth, yet little or no action have been done. Madam Speaker, Currently at Humanities Cayman Islands Prison, there's a section walled off for our juveniles and a program that supposedly helps. It can be argued that the current system they have now is working because of a report in juvenile imprisonment. But in all honesty, Madam Speaker, the system isn't working. The youth are just outsmarting the system. For example, if you have a dog and every time you call your dog, you lock it up, then eventually the dog will stop coming to you because it knows you're just going to lock it up. Just then and there, that dog just outsmarted you. Madam Speaker, when I grew up with a simple phrase in my head. Anything worthwhile doing is worthwhile doing well. We shouldn't just stop and cancel the entire project. We should have pushed through and persevere. I understand that some bad decisions are necessary so that you can have a great story to tell, but story time is over. We need to snap back to reality. We are talking about the future of the Cayman Islands here, and we only have one chance to make sure that we do the best we can to ensure that our future will be our salvation and not our destruction. Madam Speaker, not everyone is perfect and will get it right the first time. Like they say, the early bird may get the worm, but the second mice gets the cheese. We all make mistakes in life, some greater than others. We are quick to judge those who have done wrong but have done nothing to help them correct it. To that, I say, don't judge them until you know them. Don't underestimate them until you've challenged them. Do not talk about them until you've talked to them. We need to let our young offenders know that they still matter. The reason why I say the word matter is because they never have, they'll never be, and they'll never experience life the way they're supposed to do until that we recognize that they matter. Perhaps they don't have any parents in their life to look them in the eye and say that they matter, but it is our country and our youth, so we need to be the ones to make sure that they know that they matter. Madam Speaker, the government may ask the question, why are we going to build this multi-million-dollar rehabilitation center for only 5 to 6 kids? And the answer to that is much more complex than the question itself. The cost to the country if these kids aren't saved will be greater. We will spend more money in the courts for repeat juveniles and more money in prisons if these youth juveniles have a negative transition. Those 5 to 6 kids are still human and they have a life. If we do not spend proper time and money rehabilitating these kids, we could experience loss of life in our youth. Madam Speaker, the rehabilitation center will go further than just opening its doors to young offenders. The center will open its doors to every child under the age of 18. It is time that we stop closing the doors on our youth. Whether they are suffering from anxiety, depression, or just need some professional help, the doors will be open for them. Whether they are in primary school, high school, or college, the doors will be open for them. This multi-million-dollar center won't just be about rehabilitating. We can include different departments in it, such as a trading school for those who prefer hands-on learning, an academic school for those who prefer to further their education while at rehab, dorm rooms for youth who may be suffering from domestic violence or a bad home. The point is, this multi-million-dollar center will be a multi-purpose one. Madam Speaker, by having a multi-purpose rehabilitation center that hosts factors of other departments, we will not only be recognized locally, we will be recognized regionally and internationally. This means that countries from across the Caribbean and the world will send their youth and or young offenders to the Cayman Islands for a professional rehab center and juvenile detention center. This means the Cayman Islands will make accurate income from both centers. Madam Speaker, if for some reason the government votes no to this motion, it's okay. Not everyone has good taste. But they aren't just saying no to this motion. They are saying no to our youth, no to the betterment of Cayman, no to the future of the Cayman Islands. But the tables will turn. Go ahead.
Does the honorable leader of opposition believe that the programs such as sports or other education programs presented does not or is not adequate, or the government are not funding enough for the youth? Well, I think.
I can't answer that question because you didn't claim it was a point of elucidation or point of order, so I'm going to continue. Madam Speaker, the tables will turn. When they say no to our youth, they're saying no to their seats here in the Legislative Assembly. If they say no to our youth, those same youth will say no to them next or other elections to come. So if you came into this house with a mindset of saying no, 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 I suggest you change your vote to yes, yes, yes. Madam Speaker, Today, I urge each member of this House to rise as one and agree on the need to implement a juvenile detention center and youth rehabilitation center. Let's not put things off for tomorrow when we can do it today. In any moment of a decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. Let's be the great thing that happens to this generation. Like they say, the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were trolling upwards through the night. Let's make the change that is well needed. We must give our young offenders, our youth, and our countries a chance to be phenomenal, or we will be forgotten. Like Franklin D. Roosevelt said, we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. But Madam Speaker, I cannot do it alone. I need to do it together as one united country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me to speak. In the Cayman Islands, we only currently have one juvenile in Eagle House, which is the area in which juveniles are presently kept. As of May 2019, this year, this particular juvenile will be 18 years of age, which by law he will become an adult. In this vein, I find it therefore necessary for me to stress that in the past, yes, there has been a need for a juvenile detention center, but as is presently, we have seen less juvenile behavioral problems within society. This is due to many programs that have been put in place to alleviate children becoming involved in unethical behavior. Madam Speaker, we already have institutions that cater to juveniles who do not commit very serious crimes such as robbery with a firearm in imitation or real, or something like an assault, etc. These institutions are Francis Bawden Home and Bonaventure Home. The Francis Bawden Home is for youth with behavioral issues that either need to escape a bad living environment, which is not safe for them due to various problems at home, or they simply cannot be controlled by their parents or guardians. Madam Speaker, when children commit a serious crime, they are not taken into the Bonaventure Home, but they are put into, as previously mentioned, Eagle House. Bonaventure serves as a behavioral modification center. It offers educational classes, vocational courses, CXC programs, and general education. The program length usually lasts for 6 months. Therefore, as you see, Madam Speaker, we do have a detention center. It is not a prison, not an abusive system, but instead, it is a facility that houses juvenile delinquents, which offers many nourishing elements. Dedicated individuals within the Bonaventure Home gives much care, love, discipline to the children. They're completely passionate about making sure that the lives of the children, before leaving, are 100% ready to make a positive impact on society, deeming it a proper juvenile detention center. Madam Speaker, it has been brought to the government's attention that there has been neglect in the past of not fulfilling the needs of the Bonaventure Home. Although this home has become a better place, it is the government's responsibility and duty to make sure our youth continues to be cared for, and therefore we pledge to live up to our expectations by adding more funds to the budget in order for other programs to be introduced. Madam Speaker, we do not need another institution to house in behavioral children because the Bonaventure Home is adequate enough. It is not a matter of space because the children who need to come fluctuates between 5 and 8, and is not a matter of change because the change lies within the children. Madam Speaker, we, as the Caymanian community, need to remember that, as is stated by Mr. Alfred McLeod, correctional counselor at Her Majesty's Prison, a child criminal is a victim first. This means that they're most likely a child who commits a criminal offense, has or is being abused. There is no such thing as a bad child, just bad situations. And in these situations, there should be people in the community and in the schools that help these kids. We cannot expect them to be good citizens in our society if we neglect and cast them aside when they get too hard to handle and put them in a facility that serves as a place to contain them. We absolutely need programs that will nurture their skills and their strengths. And just as importantly, parenting programs is a must. We also need to focus our energy on creating a society that understands their struggles, find teachers who take initiative and recognize signs of a distrusted child or a distressed child, and more counselors in our schools. We cannot control the outcomings of every family, but we can sure help children who need the attention. Lastly, Madam Speaker, while I personally agree with the fact that we do need a separate facility from the Northwood Prison to house juveniles who commit serious offenses, and the fact that we do have a need for a rehabilitation center in general, this is just a band-aid on a bigger picture. The issues lie within society and the family. We need to start making it easy for young Caymanians in their own society and to instill in them that prison is not just an escape from reality. The solution is as simple as nipping it in the bud before the problem becomes too hard to handle. All of what I've mentioned may not be foolproof or dependable, but they are practical, and they do not only affect one part of society, but all. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak about the provision of secure accommodation for young offenders under the age of 18 years. May I be permitted to express my sincere appreciation of the fact that we have this opportunity of discussing a subject which is of public interest. Madam Speaker, it is commonly known throughout that a child's welfare is paramount consideration of every country. Therefore, the inherent special needs and vulnerability of all children is to be taken into account in the implementation and development of laws, hereby promoting the primary goal of a juvenile justice system, to be focused on rehabilitation and reintegration into the juvenile. Yet, the government's National Action Plan for Rehabilitation does not provide a strategy for dealing with juvenile prisoners. Regrettably, they continue to shelve the Missouri Model Project, which was initiated in 2013, despite spending $1.3 million and pouring the foundation for the proposed Juvenile Justice Center, an initiative which defends every bone of our motion, reinventing the practices of rehabilitating young offenders. Madam Speaker, the government may try to make excuses that this country does not have funds available. However, this issue needs to be addressed and the youth needs to be given first priority. The issue cannot simply be swept under the rug and allow our children to fail. If we allow this to occur, it will create a more serious problem of society. I make no apology for quoting Winston Churchill's immoral words describing a decent criminal justice system. He said, "The way in which it treats its crime and criminals is the true test of civilization of any country and marks and measures the living virtue in it." If he was here to pronounce his verdict on this proposal, he would demand that the government addresses its inappropriate approaches to housing young offenders and secure their education and training post-custody. Surely there is a real concern when the Youth Justice Law 2005 revision prevents our courts to acquire an order to place anyone who is 17 years in a secure accommodation, despite the fact that the Children Law 2012 revision defines them as being a child until they reach the age of 18 years. This legislative gap creates a real risk because the children are not eligible to be sent to Bonaventures or Francis Bawden home. Instead, they are treated as adults and remanded to Her Majesty's Prison. The underlying problem with this option is that Her Majesty's Prison does not include a wing for young offenders because it was built to house children. It currently houses Category A, B, and C prisoners. To put this into perspective, Category A prisoners are those whose convictions have the perception that if he was to escape, it would extremely be dangerous to the general public and also police and national security. Surely the government can see that shoving our offenders into a space like sardines with Category A prisoners does not qualify as a suitable housing or meets the children's individual needs. I will, however, caution the government that this type of housing contradicts Section 6.3 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, which directs that juvenile prisoners are to be segregated from adult prisoners, and every juvenile prisoner shall be treated in a manner appropriate to his or her age. I would also like to take the opportunity to remind them that the Convention on the Rights of a Child, CRC, directs that the child aged 17 should not be treated as adults. Therefore, where the government has left any juvenile languishing within Her Majesty Prison for extended periods of time, it faces a real problem with the breaching of Article 37B of the CRC, because a juvenile detention is to be for the shortest appropriate time. Madam Speaker, the government may argue that this motion is not critical, as children represent less than 5% of the total population. Yet an organization whose first objective is to protect the public by holding adult prisoners securely cannot be expected to provide the level of care, supervision, and support required by challenging teenagers. I am obliged to remind the government that the purpose of a child going through the formal justice system is to reform the child and ensure his or her reintegration into society as responsible and productive citizens. Ensuring the reformation and reintegration of juveniles, however, requires necessary facilities and skill acquisition. This is what our motion is about. Let's not beat around the bush and state it clearly. Her Majesty's Prison is the wrong place to house an offender less than 18 years. Its rules and procedures are for adults who have not been amended to suit children. The real risk is that there are no restrictions on the use of force, and despite its unsuitability as a punishment, segregation can also be ordered. Inevitably, in such a situation, these children are at significant risk of not receiving fair treatment, which can lead to the deterioration of their health and well-being. We need to take a lot of care in how we deal with our youth offenders, for which segregation may not be an option. We need to be very careful in how we use segregated models with them. Therefore, I challenge this government to not just make a commitment to support the motion as was done in 2013, but actually follow through.
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But to actually follow through by building walls on the foundation already standing. I am pleading with them to take the time out to understand the challenges of young offenders and support this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of private member's motion number 1 of 2019. It is no secret that youth crime in our beloved Isles is on the rise, with a grand total of 70 offenses committed by both males and females as young as age 14. More than half of those which were drug-related, a crime that can be punishable up to life in prison. Cayman has no youth rehabilitation or juvenile detention centers, so a lot of them end up serving their sentences, if caught, at Northwood or Fairbanks, mixed in with men and women significantly older than them. Parents often complain about the age gap difference in the high schools, but yet no one voices their concerns for a seemingly worse pairing of underage youth with grown, hardened criminals. As with most aspects of life, you always have to think about the cost. As a popular rap song says, cash rules everything around me. Cream, dollar bills, y'all. In order to effectively evaluate the financial side of a possible youth rehabilitation and detention center, we need to determine the cost of building and maintaining the center and compare that with the current cost of sending young offenders to Northward. Youth rehab centers are specialized treatment facilities to treat and counsel drug and alcohol addictions as well as other disorders in children and adolescents. Youth detention centers, quite simply put, is prison for persons under the age of majority, the age that the law recognizes you as an adult. But how much do these centers cost? There's no exact amount, as there are many factors that can change that number, but here's an estimate. Firstly, we have to find land or a building to facilitate the center. In the past, a $10 million project was started at Fairbanks, but abandoned due to funding constraints. There are also talks to build one at the Bonaventure Boys Home, but that was also put on hold due to concerns raised by the residents in the neighboring areas. This was at an estimated cost of $2.5 million. We'll be using that figure and doubling it to account for both centers. The next thing we have to consider is the cost of staff and training. Within the center, the jobs there include medical and executive director, intake staff, medical staff, clerical staff, janitorial workers, caseworkers, managers, and administrators. A detention center would require most of the same staff. Using Glassdoor, a website where employees and former employees anonymously review companies, I was able to find an estimate of each of these positions. I tried to be realistic and include a likely amount of staff in each position. This total came out to be $1.6 million a year. We'll set aside another $500,000 to offset other expenses like utilities. This totals to $2.1 million. Our grand total now comes up to $9.2 million. This includes the cost of maintenance, which is $4.2 million, as well as the $5 million to build both centers. I was unable to find an exact amount of how much it costs to keep the juveniles at Northwood and Fairbanks, but the prison service budget is $12.5 million. Already, the yearly budget for both centers is significantly lower than that of the prisons, $4.2 million versus $12.5 million. Not only would we be able to detain youths, but also treat them and get them the help that they need. Compare this with what we currently do, where these juveniles are put into the system at a young age, mixed in with seasoned criminals. Allow me to demonstrate. Here, I have a glass of water representing our youth entering the justice system. Here, I'll be using an example of criminals already in the justice system. Watch as I pour this into the water, and you see that the water is no longer clear. Everyone can see that? We are the products of the environment we live in. So what does that say about these kids who spend so much time in a cell block with serious offenders? Now that we have crunched the numbers and have a figure in our head, let me ask you these questions, the government. How much is our youth worth? What is the cost of the future of our economy, of our country? How do you put value on lives so young? There are few negatives to the construction of both the rehabilitation and detention center, the negatives mainly being financial. But what's a few dollars compared to the betterment of our children? Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Detention, a form of locked custody of youth pretrial who are arrested. Juvenile detention centers are the juvenile justice system versions of prisons, and prisons were never made to better people. They're made to lock people away. Madam Speaker, I'm here to address this motion, which is asking for the government to implement a juvenile detention and youth rehabilitation center. Madam Speaker, people argue that the unnecessary use of a secure detention exposes troubled juveniles to an environment that closely resembles adult prisons and jails than the kinds of community and family-based interventions proven to be most effective, such as Big Sister, Big Brother, Boys to Men, Girls Force, etc. There is no change to criminal behavior, no change to certain mental illnesses without strong and family support, communicated Mr. McLeod, correctional counselor of the Cayman Islands Prison Services. He also added, it doesn't matter how you counsel them. If they aren't going back to the environment that nurtures their needs, they will not improve. Madam Speaker, The juveniles are victims first. It is likely that they are coming from abusive families or being neglected. One juvenile that was incarcerated shared that he started smoking from 9 years old to relax my mind of thinking of my family problems, as quoted in the Yolande Seaford report. Community and family impacts a child so much. They impact a child's personality, beliefs and values, and most certainly a child's behavior. So why not instill community and family-based programs? Some churches that have men groups go to the Bonaventures Boys Home to work with kids. Women within the community can also talk to the girls about STDs, promiscuous behavior, etc. And we all know these days youth voice their opinions on those matters, whether we like it or not. You have programs in school, such as the John Gray's High School Boys to Men, who are a group of 25 boys who are said to present delinquent behaviors, but are being mentored and worked with to take responsibility in their actions and how to carry themselves, and are said to be becoming respectable young men. These boys have pride instilled in them. They have also given back to the community. A sense of joy and pride I feel to see them trying. They're like my own sons. They have made both me and staff proud, said Mr. Murray, the organizer of Boys to Men and the counselor of John Gray High School. Madam Speaker, contrary to the popular belief, the punishment of imprisonment is not necessarily as an effective deterrent as people are led to believe. Statistics shown in the Yolande Seaford report shows that the rate of re-imprisonment is 73.3%. Almost 3/4 of the men interviewed in Eagle House and Northward indicated that this is not their first time incarcerated. Studies have shown that the involvement in the criminal juvenile justice system increases the risk of recidivism. Madam Speaker, an article in the Time newsletter stated researchers found that rather than rehabilitating young delinquents, juvenile detentions which lumps troubled kids with other troubled kids appear to worsen their behavioral problems. Compared with other kids with a similar history of bad behavior, those who entered the juvenile justice system were nearly 7 times more likely to be arrested for crimes as adults. Further, those who ended up being sentenced to juvenile prisons were 37 times more likely to be arrested again as adults, compared with similarly misbehaved kids who were either not caught up or not put into the system. Madam Speaker, one reason why incarcerating the young is not productive is because of the detrimental effects of labeling, which stigmatizes or heroizes the juvenile as a bad man or bad girl. Come on now, parents, students, we both know the mentality of this here generation. I just got, or how the kids would say, locked up. I just got freed up. I'm out the pen, so that makes me a bad man. Now I present this question. Is that the impression we want to leave in our children by placing them in the detention center? Madam Speaker, there are facilities already made to better children, such as Bonaventures Boys Home, who offer auto mechanics, education such as CXC Math, English, and Science, just to name a few. Bonaventure, a facility already instilled, is as effective as the Juvenile Detention and Youth Rehabilitation Center wanting to be implemented. Bonaventure has a powerful impact on our children. In particular, one young man who was placed in the Bonaventures Boys Home, which was called the Cayman Marine Institute back then. He went through these same programs as Bonaventure, and this young man has become a splendid adult. Someone we look up at, someone we rely on, a man of our community and a man of our country, and a man who has been successful. Madam Speaker, most children who act out have a problem and they use their actions as a cover, and instead of leaving them be, the community can help better these juveniles because there's no such thing as a bad child. No one was born bad, nobody. Madam Speaker, people have the tendency to be reactive instead of proactive, and concluding that once you invest time on these juveniles, it makes a world of difference. Building a detention and rehabilitation center is not the answer to everything. You can build the center and your problems may still exist, strongly expressed Mr. Sidney Williams of the Bonaventures Boys Home. Now I finalize my speech by saying, why don't we as a community help out each other? Be the Cayman community that everyone talks about. The one who is united, the one who helps each other for the better, the one who is K-mankind.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture, and Lands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon. To address the private member motion number 1 of 2019, brought forward by the opposition regarding the implementation of a juvenile detention center and rehabilitation center. I find it necessary to point out the positive as well as the negative impacts of the motion presented here today. Madam Speaker, the juvenile justice system is believed to handle and rehabilitate children who are falling through the cracks to then end up going through the criminal justice system. There are many advocates among persons like defense lawyers, child psychologists, and former juvenile offenders who believe that vulnerable adolescents are better safeguarded where they're not tried in the same manner as adults. However, let us not become complacent and forget the fact that there are numerous critics who regard such a system as flawed and aim to see it reformed, while others believe that criminals should receive the same punishment regardless of their age. There are both negative and positive impacts, Madam Speaker, that fall under the umbrella of a juvenile rehabilitation/detention center, good and bad everywhere. Juvenile detention centers, like adult correctional facilities, vary in security levels and conditions. In a juvenile detention center, there may be great importance on academic instruction and programs to teach young offenders new behavioral thoughts and strategies to help them avoid committing future offenses, however the odds remain. I now focus on two documented aspects of a juvenile center which can bring positive attributes but can also bring about repercussions, which I will explain. Madam Speaker, protection from physical and sexual abuse by keeping youth apart from adult offenders is absolutely a positive attribute. However, I must elaborate a bit on this particular aspect. I agree that protection of our youth from adult offenders is a main priority, but it leads me to wonder if the opposition considered that within the walls of such a center, there may be older youth who commit sexual crimes amongst other things by preying on younger vulnerable youths. Accordingly, to make sure these sorts of occurrences do not take place, the personal staff of such a facility must be scrutinized to the fullest also. In order for youth to be protected from staff who may be abusive or may have an existing record of molesting children. Sometimes children will be subjected to worse treatment than what they were receiving at home because of the background of certain staff members employed. We cannot be sure that this will not occur, and if it does, on a wider scale, this center will not be then fit for purpose.
Madam Speaker, point of clarification. Are you saying that the staff...
Yes.
Do you give way to the...
I decline.
Please continue.
Okay. Sometimes children will be subjected to worse treatment than what they were receiving at home because of the background of certain staff members employed. We cannot be sure that this will not occur. And if it does on a wider scale, this center will not then be fit for purpose. Therefore, due diligence must be carried out. Rehabilitation through programs for psychological counseling, substance addiction treatment, and access to education is definitely another ethical aspect to assist children to get back on the right track. Madam Speaker, be that as it may, while I fully agree that related rehabilitation programs are on the plus side of helping youth back into society, I pose the question, is a detention/rehabilitation center the only location where such programs can be accessed? I think not. There are schools where youth can receive an education while at the same time be involved in various community youth programs to empower and prepare them for whatever challenges they come up against on a daily basis. Inclusive of church youth groups, it makes more sense to spend funds adding to or enhancing existing programs or even adding other feasible programs instead of building a new center to house youth to basically be involved with those very same programs.
Madam Speaker, point of clarification, please.
Do you give way to the Honorable Deputy Leader of Opposition?
Madam Speaker, let me pick up a little behavior that I have seen in this House. He does not give way.
Thank you. That being said, we must never forget that programs are supposed to be tailored around each individual child and their development pace, rather than focusing on the offenses which occurs on a daily basis.
Madam Speaker, point of order, please.
What is your point of order?
You said that church groups can deal with these at-risk juveniles. However, is that really reliable? And if church groups could deal with the juveniles, don't you think there'd be no at-risk kids left? Also, you said that the staff members will start molesting children at the Her Majesty's prison. Are you saying that our staff members are criminals?
I did not say that they will molest children. I said it could happen. So, I don't know. I do that. So you have, okay, whatever. Okay. Madam Speaker, one of the negative aspects of rehabilitation and detention centers is the loss of family connectivity and quality time together. The victim, as well as the caring family members, feel the pain. Is this really justice for the victim? And not to forget, there's that revolving door which enables a lifestyle that leads to adult convictions. This can all stem from the fact that being locked away from society for most of one's life is what is best known, and therefore, this environment becomes their comfort zone. Being locked away becomes the norm of what life is all about and can cause retaliation, whereby some become repeat offenders. Madam Speaker, there must be checks and balances put in place before making a decision on what the opposition is seeking. We, the government, feel that what is being asked needs much consideration and thought before we can commit ourselves
I recognize the elected member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Point of order. At this present moment, we are sending our juveniles away for detention purposes when we cannot facilitate them here. So are you saying that having one on island doesn't put them closer to their families?
Madam Speaker, may I answer, please? As stated by Ms. Paulinda Mendoza-Williams of the Department of Children and Family Services, she said that we stopped sending children away in 2007 for detentional purposes. Thank you.
Please continue.
We must weigh the pros and the cons of putting into place such an institution. With those thoughts in mind, Madam Speaker, I say to the opposition, the government needs to invest in the youth through other fruitful means, not lock them up. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to begin by addressing a few points from the government. The government said that there's a chance that employees could molest juveniles at Her Majesty's prison. Does that not enforce why we should have a rehabilitation center with qualified professionals to deal with these youth? As opposition, we firmly believe that there's not a current working program which properly addresses and deals with this issue that some youth are facing, and we suggest an implementation of the motion put before you today. The following points will address why those under 18 are not fully responsible and provide reasons why adolescents are compelled to commit offenses and they are not in part responsible for their actions. Madam Speaker, the law recognizes that an adult is someone who is 18 or older, which means that they can do things like vote, serve on a jury, smoke, and consume alcohol. This evidence shows that persons under the age of 18 are not fully responsible for their actions, nor should they be subject to the same punishment as adult offenders. This leads me to conclude that adolescent offenders need the proper rehabilitation and correction from their irresponsible behavior to become fully functioning members of society, rather than the same punishment received by adult offenders. This also leads me to say that as opposition, we do not believe that the Cayman Islands has an adequate program to ensure that offenders are able to leave a negative home environment. Multiple studies, including an extensive 2009 report from the National Center for Biotechnology Information, showed that 574 persons from ages 5 to 21 were studied to examine the correlation between physical abuse in early years and juvenile delinquency, violence, or other behaviors deemed socially acceptable. The study found persons who were abused during the first 5 years of life were more likely to be arrested as adolescents. This shows that parental neglect and abuse can contribute towards irresponsible behavior. Some studies show that children experiencing neglect, such as dehydration and malnutrition, are prone to poor emotional stability and weak social skills. Adolescents rely on the emotional sector of the brain when making decisions. Therefore, neglect would directly cause poor decision-making in adolescence. The government has stated that Bonaventure can deal with juvenile delinquents. However, there is no follow-up program to deal with a negative home environment for these children. They're just put back into the same environment that they were in and influenced again to make poor decisions. Madam Speaker, drugs, most prominently cocaine, nicotine, and marijuana.
Please give all your comments to the Premier. Please continue.
Marijuana and alcohol have the potential to become addictive in certain people. Multiple studies, including a study from the National Center for Biotechnology Information, have revealed evidence that the younger an individual starts using a drug, especially during adolescence, the more susceptible they are to developing substance use disorders, or in other terms, addiction. We do not have the proper facilities to deal with addiction, as addiction is a disease and it is not like a condition that the children are under. The current program we have does not deal with this at all and leaves these youth with addiction, so by the time they get out of prison, they are back into drugs again. Recent scientific research using MRI scanning technology shows that adolescent brains are underdeveloped compared to the fully formed adult brain. For example, Harvard Medical School, UCLA, and the National Institute of Mental Health have tried to map the development of brains in adolescence. This research shows that during the teenage years, the brain goes through pruning, in which certain information is cut back and others is kept. Madam Speaker, a UCLA brain research team found that the frontal lobe, responsible for controlling impulses, planning, prioritizing thoughts, and predicting consequences, changes most during adolescence, more than any other period of life. This means that an adolescent would not have equal reasoning skills to a fully developed adult.
Madam Speaker, point of information.
I recognize Honorable Leader
Madam
Roberts.
Speaker, what is point of information?
Elucidation, okay. Do you give way?
We decline.
Dr. DeBoer,
You have 30 seconds left.
Madam Speaker, may I ask to have a 60-second extension to finish my point, please?
Continue.
They may not appreciate the consequences or weigh information the same way adults do, said Dr. Deborah Yearling Todd. This means that we need proper professional counselors to help these children deal with the change they are experiencing and to weigh consequences properly and learn how to deal with information responsibly, to develop a proper moral compass and be properly rehabilitated. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, as opposition, we firmly believe that an implementation of this motion is absolutely necessary to provide the proper rehabilitation center needed for young offenders, as well as the chance for redemption and correction of their reckless behavior, which they are in part not responsible for. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give my contribution on the motion of incorporating a youth detention and rehabilitation center in the Cayman Islands. This center may cost a substantial amount of money. However, my view and the opposition's view is that the future of our children in the terms of crime prevention and management of offenders more than justifies the money that should be spent on such a facility. The opposition feels that the government needs to look at the bigger picture and needs to focus on the prevention of our youth from entering the court system and not turn a blind eye. The British House of Commons Homes Affairs Committee report 1993 states, and I quote, "Investment in identifying the causes of crime is clearly preferable to paying for the damage once it has been done. We cannot expect crime rates to decrease if an investment is not present in the youth." Madam Speaker, we do have the Bonaventure Boys Home and the Francis Bowden Girls Home,
and the youth and juvenile offenders are sent to those facilities from the courts. In the Yolanda Farb report, Magistrate Ramsey Hale, a former magistrate, was quoted saying, "Bonaventure Home is a boys' home that has been made as a juvenile detention center and a rehabilitation school, which it is in fact not," end quote. So basically, we have a high court judge acknowledging that this is not a fit-for-purpose facility. For example, the Bonaventure Boys Home and Francis Borden Girls Home, which were designed to provide care and protection, are now ending up with the youth and juvenile offenders among their residential population. Under these circumstances, the detention of juvenile offenders at the Bonaventure Boys Home is an unfortunate practice, and it is a retrograde step in the youth corrections in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, this represents double jeopardy for those youth by mixing offenders with children who are for the most part victims and not perpetrators of wrongdoing, and we're housing delinquents who are in fact in need of specific treatment intervention. So I may ask, is the government willing to wait until these at-risk children are already in trouble and into the court system rather than creating measures that will prevent them from even getting to the courts? Madam Speaker, as I stated, if the system was more focused on preventing the youth from committing crimes and taking the initiative to notice and to act on the signs shown, this country would be better off with less juvenile offenders and less offenders in general. When offenders are sent to Bonaventure, Francis Borden, or in some cases northward, they're taken away from their families, and as a result, the families are not involved with the rehabilitation of their child, the little rehabilitation that may be done. So, Madam Speaker, if these children are being taken away from their families, which is a consequence of their actions, understandable, how do you expect them to improve and to become better citizens of this country if after their time in these institutions, they are placed right back into the same toxic environment that contributed to them being in the court system in the very first place? Madam Speaker, the government may want to reduce or to even eliminate the cost of this facility by getting the community involved in the rehabilitation of the youth, but in my view, and in the opposition view, that would not be a good idea and it will not be effective.
Point of order.
I recognize elected member for Bordentown South.
As far as I'm concerned, I know that there is youth services program, which have cooking and have other programs that help the youth.
May I answer? That is involved in...
Madam Speaker, we choose not to answer because that's not a point of order, that's a point of elucidation, and we decline the point of elucidation.
All right. Okay. In reality, no matter how much we want to believe, the Cayman Islands are no longer an environment where the village would take care of the child, sadly. Times have changed, society has changed, and in essence, the Cayman Islands has changed. Hence, with these islands being a melting pot of over approximately 130 nationalities, sadly, the days when everybody looked out for each other no longer exist. Our community is not as close as we once were, so this may not be effective. In 2012, a rehabilitation center was supposed to be built. Plans were drawn and there was also a groundbreaking ceremony. The government of the day then took a decision to shelve the project as a result of inadequate funding, even though a budget of $3 million was agreed to and then decreased to $1.3 million. Madam Speaker, if the government saw that this institution was going to be so beneficial to our community, and I do understand that there was a cost factor at that time, why is it that over all of these years, from 2012 to today being 2019, why were funds not budgeted for the building of this institution? Do they not think about our youth who needs to be prioritized? Madam Speaker, the prison director at that time, Mr. Neil Lavis, mentioned that if he could make an area at Northwood Prison where there was a separate entrance and juvenile inmates could exercise separately, that would satisfy the human rights requirements. It is to my understanding that this was the backup plan after not having sufficient funds for the Youth Rehabilitation Center. Madam Speaker, it has now been 7 years since Mr. Lavis made this proposal, and from what I can understand was a temporary solution as a result of meeting these human rights issues. My question is, why are we going from a full rehabilitation facility that included all the intervention programs to a separate area at Northwood Prison that does not offer these programs? Extracted from the Yolanda Farb report, the deputy principal of John Gray High School said that there is an approach to behavioral issues in the school and misconduct by students, and this is often by detention, suspension, and exclusions. These are punishments, yes, however, he himself said that this is not an effective approach. So, If the deputy principal of our own high school, our local high school, is saying this and the statistics say exactly the same thing, why is it that this is not enough to show the government that a different approach needs to be taken finally that will positively impact the youth of these islands we call home? Therefore, Madam Speaker, I am appealing to the government to not focus on the cost of this facility, but to focus on the troubled youth of this country and provide them with a facility that will offer programs that will benefit them and provide them with a higher.
I recognize Honorable Premier. Do you give way to the Honorable
Sorry,
Premier?
I decline. I need to finish. I'm almost finished. The youth are the future of this country, and we, the opposition, firmly believe that they need to be more prioritized and not placed on the back burner for later. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand before you to speak to the issue of young people with mental disorders being placed in juvenile detention. Further, I wish to voice my opinion on why a youth rehabilitation center is not a one-size-fits-all. I also would like to put forward alternatives to solving the problems that we have with juvenile delinquents on the island whose charges are primarily misdemeanors like possession of marijuana or petty theft. Madam Speaker, although psychiatrists are hesitant to diagnose adolescents with mental disorders, many unfortunately have such a disorder. It is common for some who are placed into the juvenile justice system to have these disorders, although no fault of their own. Actually, the report in 2014 entitled Who Aims Report on Mental Health System in the Cayman Islands, which was done by the Ministry of Health, Youth, Sports, and Culture, states that 9% of children or adolescents have mental illness, 9%. However, we have to take into consideration children who are overlooked for more reasons than one that have such an illness. We all are aware, Madam Speaker, that mental illness is a disease in which recent times there has been an increased mortality of this illness. Mostly it is a hereditary issue and can include bipolar disorder, major depression, and schizophrenia. Children can develop a mental illness from traumatic events experienced at home, like witnessing abuse or they themselves being abused. People diagnosed with these disorders act out irrationally and have little to no control over their thoughts and actions. Rather than placing them in juvenile detention, where their condition will become worse, we need to focus on finding these children proper mental health care. Further, Madam Speaker, the route to finding these children proper mental health care is not through a rehabilitation center. The adolescent will most likely go to the rehabilitation center to receive therapy while they're at juvenile detention. The last thing that adolescents will want to do is share their feelings and thoughts with someone unknown to them while they're incarcerated. In such a situation, they'll feel threatened with trustworthiness for anyone, aside from the people who are in there with them under the same conditions. Rather than implementing a juvenile detention center to house adolescents, Madam Speaker, we should look away from punishing a child in the confinements of 4 walls for weeks or months on end. They will not reflect on their behavior but continue to indulge in it. A child will not understand what it means to be in juvenile detention or a rehabilitation center, no matter how many times you try to explain. They will lose hope in ever being successful or looked at as ordinary, which can lead to depression. In the juvenile detention center, they will find like-minded delinquents and wear juvie as a badge of honor. When deciding on proper punishments for committing a crime as an underage citizen, community service is a solution that we should consider. For example, if a child has been charged for driving a vehicle...
Madam Speaker, point of order.
What is your point of order?
How would this deal with mental illness? Community service, this doesn't deal with anyone with addiction with mental illness. The rehabilitation center deals with that. Community service wouldn't help these people at all.
I'm not referencing to those who have a mental illness in this paragraph right here. I'm talking to charges that are misdemeanors, like petty theft or possession of marijuana. Can I continue?
Please continue.
For example, if a child that has been charged for driving a vehicle without a license, they can be ordered to volunteer in an emergency room where they will understand the consequences of not following the rules, which could end up in a brutal car accident. It is a higher chance that a child will understand the consequences of their actions if they are given community tasks to fulfill, while at the same time receiving counseling for their unethical behavior. Madam Speaker, The government, in my opinion, is doing a fantastic job of ensuring that a child is being raised in a healthy environment through many ways, including in funding and implementing school programs and other social programs. It is up to the parents to do their part by making sure their children are involved in such programs. It is therefore also necessary to prevent juveniles from even committing crimes through strengthening our foster care system, where they will have a much better living environment and be amongst people who care. We need to get to the root of the problem to eradicate it, which is to bring stability and attention to the lives of our youths, to deter them from committing crimes.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
What is your point of order?
We don't need a foster system. We need a rehabilitation center with proper professionals to deal with these youth.
Madam Speaker, let me pick up something that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said. That is not a point of order. That's a point of elucidation. Therefore, we will not answer.
Please continue.
Attention to the lives of our youth to deter them from even committing crimes. We need effective parenting to instill the morals and values that will assist them in becoming an upstanding citizen. Madam Speaker, I am with hope that what I have stated has not fallen on deaf ears of the opposition, and that we can all work together to make sure the Cayman Islands youth for tomorrow will be given the attention they deserve to bring prosperity to their future and future generations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Cayman Brac East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find it necessary to speak on such an important issue in regards to what the private member's motion calls for, implementing a juvenile detention center and a youth rehabilitation center in the Cayman Islands. It is precisely as stated in the 6th whereas of the motion brought by the opposition that there is no such recognized official institution. Juvenile delinquency and
Madam
youth
Speaker,
crime.
point of order.
What is your point of order?
He is undermining my motion that we did clearly state that there was a juvenile detention center. We just said it was never a proper one. We did not say there was no juvenile detention center.
Juvenile delinquency and youth crime, Madam Speaker, have been the topic of many studies, and their debilitating effect is clear, especially for those already in detention centers. According to the National Youth Policy of 2011 for children, there are significant milestones in a transition from childhood to adulthood. The process starts at 10, the legal age of responsibility, intensifies at 13, and again at 18, the age of maturity, and begins to phase out at 25. There is no doubt that children usually live what they see. Madam Speaker, without good nurturing parents to love and give children attention that they deserve and while showing right from wrong, this is the first step for the beginning of a child to feel isolated. There would be very little need for detention or rehabilitation centers if good parental background was involved for every child. Both parents and teachers must motivate children, not make them feel like they can never contribute positively to our society. Please do not misunderstand
Madam
me,
Speaker, point of elucidation.
Do you give way to the Honorable Deputy Leader of Opposition?
I decline.
Please continue.
Both parents and teachers must motivate children, not make them feel like they can never contribute positively within their community. Please do not misunderstand me, Madam Speaker. What I am saying here, yes, even with caring parents and teachers, there will still be children falling through the cracks, but the numbers, I am sure, would be less. Fathers and mothers must live up to their parenting responsibilities, and teachers must do what they are charged to do. And neighbors must do what my mother always speaks about, be the neighbor's keeper in assisting children who are seen to be in need. Having said that, Madam Speaker, another important issue to be addressed is that of juveniles who commit minor offenses being subjected to far harsher consequences of the adult judicial system. Juveniles have been subjected to the same courts and prisons as adults, and unfortunately, this trend continues. Madam Speaker, in August 2015, a report by CARICOM, or the Caribbean Community, entitled Eye of the Future, Investing in Youth Now for Tomorrow's Community, reflected what was said by a young offender, and I quote, "We are supposed to be the future, and yet we are in jail. We are dead, we are home unemployed, doing nothing for ourselves." Taking a step back into the past, Madam Speaker, for many years, Miss Sybil Joyce Hilton, MBE, Cayman's first probation and welfare officer, a lifelong advocate for disadvantaged young people, fought for basically what we might term as human rights for young offenders during her tenure. Ms. Hilton not only lobbied for the then government, but she also got the public's attention to change judicial and proceedings for juveniles. This stemmed from her observance of a court session where a juvenile was being treated as an adult offender. My question then is, has the judicial system for juveniles continued as was advocated by Ms. Hilton? I would venture to say not, if juveniles are still being incarcerated with hardcore adult criminals. Madam Speaker, while I agree with the opposition that a first-class youth detention and rehabilitation center would be ideal for the entire Cayman Islands to provide services required to tackle the problems of youth and to keep them separate from adult criminals that commit very serious crimes, I find it necessary to also say that being a part of the government, I am caught between a rock and a hard place, but our options must be weighed here. We need to think outside the box on the importance of what is being sought by the opposition and weigh it against the odds. We must do what is necessary to alleviate our youth from becoming a menace to society. If we do not do the necessary, we will end up spending more through courts and prison because we do not pay full attention to the situation of each individual youth when we should have. Madam Speaker, it is incumbent on the government to take a realistic approach to the motion in question. While I too feel the motion is good and timely, at this point in time, we must also look at the many surrounding factors. While a proper budget is in place for infrastructure as well as programs to facilitate such an institution and the cost of running it on a daily basis, it would be all for nothing not to have a proper assessment in place, and it would not be right for us to sit here idly and say aye when we mean no. Madam Speaker, there is much to be taken into consideration, and I am with hope that the government and the opposition can work together for a positive outcome of this motion. If not today, sometime in the near future. After all, our children are the future of tomorrow, and they must have help from all directions to allow them to reach the stars. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Savannah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to bring light to the much-needed benefits of building a rehabilitation center in the Cayman Islands that focus on the detection and treatment of juveniles that might be or are suffering from any kind of mental disorder, and the treatment of juveniles suffering from addiction to drugs. Madam Speaker, the rehabilitation of Cayman's delinquent youth is a serious problem in these islands. As the 2018 National Drug Council annual survey reported, Cayman's youth are exposed to high rates of drug usage within the homes and community, and that where children are raised in families where there is a history of addiction to alcohol and drugs, the risk of delinquency increases. Once such criminal behavior takes hold, the government has a responsibility to find the appropriate facilities for such youth to obtain rehabilitation before it's too late. Having the proper staff and facilities to treat, evaluate, and diagnose juveniles at an early age before they become adults would benefit the juveniles because through evaluation, they'd be able to tell the treatment is necessary or not. Early treatment would address problems like frequent tantrums, often talking about fears and worries, constant motion, academic struggles or declining grades, and a lack of sleep or too much sleep. This may also prevent more serious and complicated problems from developing as a child enters his or her teenage years that would carry on into adulthood. Madam Speaker, the Journal of Pediatrics did a report on the prevalence and treatment on depression, anxiety, and the conduct problems in U.S. children. This report estimated among children aged 3 to 17 years old, 7.1 had current anxiety problems, 7.4 had current behavioral and conduct problems, 3.2% had current depression. Of these children dealing with depression, 80% received treatment in the previous year, compared to the 59.3% of those with anxiety and 53.5% of those with behavioral and conduct problems. Model-adjusted effects indicated condition severity and presence of a comorbid mental disorder were associated with treatment recipient. This shows us that mental health issues are prevalent and there is a demand for treatment of juveniles outside of Cayman. Madam Speaker, an assessment of the Cayman Islands situation was done by consultant criminologist Yolanda Ford in a 2006 report to the Cayman Islands government on predisposing factors to criminality in Cayman Islands. Page 117 of the report addresses the issue of youth training and rehabilitation center. Her report points to key stakeholders in the juvenile correction system, laminating the absence of appropriate remand and rehabilitation for offenders. There was a general conclusion by technocrats that such services were being reduced in the midst of deteriorating juvenile criminality problem. The report also highlighted relevant comments made by the magistrate Margaret Ramsey Hale, who noted the following: the Bonaventure Boys Home and Francis Borden Girls Home, which were designed to provide care and protection, are now ended up with incorrigible youth and juvenile offenders among the residential population. In conclusion, the report recommended that the residential training, youth training, and rehabilitation be estimated in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the key benefit of a rehabilitation center in Cayman Islands is that the upgraded facilities and increased staff would allow for government to treat and manage juvenile addicts rather than to send them away. By sending the juveniles overseas, there is no guaranteed way of guaranteeing that child's safety in that facility. Nor are there any frequent in-person checkups from the government or from the family to personally assess that child / juvenile. Having the child's parents or family visit them is important because this shows the addicted juvenile that the family is committed to helping them get clean and stay clean. Sending the juvenile off island to a foreign center would be a big shock to them, as they are surrounded by people who don't speak like them, don't look like them, nor share the same culture or custom as them. This juvenile may find it challenging to adjust to the methods of treatment if they don't feel like they're comfortable or accustomed with their surroundings. It is clear, Madam Speaker, that the Cayman Islands local arrangements have...
Sorry. Point of elucidation, please. Do you decline or do you give?
Do you give?
I decline. It is clear, Madam Speaker, that the Cayman Islands local arrangements has not been successful in the rehabilitation process. Such juvenile delinquents to overseas facilities carry such huge challenges for these enrolled in such programs, in addition to their family members. As the Yolanda Ford report concluded, I believe that we have made the case for the Cayman Islands government to establish a youth rehabilitation to house high-risk juvenile delinquents in the Cayman Islands. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the Attorney General of this 12th Youth Parliament, there are a few points being put forward by the opposition in regards to the private member's motion brought that I wish to address. Madam Speaker, I would like to elaborate a bit to define a few terms for all to understand what the motion is specifically speaking to. The term rehabilitation is the action of restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy after imprisonment, addiction, or illness. The definition of the term juvenile detention is a prison for people under the age of majority, often termed as delinquents, to which they have been sentenced and committed for a period due to committing some sort of crime against society. In the passage of this motion, it would allow the youth under the age of 18 to be facilitated in such a detention and rehabilitation center while retrieving treatment and of counseling and other feasible programs in order to assist in their return to society with the hope of becoming a good law-abiding citizen. It would in turn also alleviate those very same youths from being among adults who committed serious crimes. And the issue of separating youths from adults is a very important aspect when our children are to be institutionalized amongst them. This is shown in Section 11, Subsection 1 of the Youth Justice Law 2005 revision, which specifically speaks the separation of young persons from adult persons in police stations. Of course, that section specifically speaks to police stations. Therefore, on the other hand, some may then ask, what about the youth being incarcerated with adult prisoners in the prisons, and rightly so. Madam Speaker, as of right now, there are 2 prisons in Grand Cayman which cater to male and female adults. One of the prisons, as you know, is Her Majesty Prison in Northwood, and the other is Fairbanks Prison. Normally, Fairbanks Prison for women ranges on an average of 14 persons at any one time. Currently, there are 16 females at Fairbanks Prison. However, it is acknowledged that Northwood Prison can at times reach its maximum capacity. In this regard, statistics reveal that maximum capacity of Northwood is 213 persons. However, as of August 2018, there are 227 prisoners in this same prison, which definitely cause an overcrowding issue. This in itself, Madam Speaker, presents a serious problem. Therefore, in that interim, I ask the question, does anyone seriously think that children committing crimes who are vulnerable, who live in a terrible living environment, usually most times because of dysfunctional parents, should be locked away in Northwood Prison? I will answer that question myself to say that this should not, under any circumstances, happen. Again, to reiterate, Madam Speaker, the Youth Justice Law 2005 revision speaks to many aspects of youths, including trials in the courts when these youths commit crimes. In this regard, we see that Section 7.1 specifically talks about a young person and a person who attained the age of 17 being jointly charged with any criminal offense. And in subsection 2, this speaks to the fact of the power to order joint trial of young person with an adult. In layman terms, this is basically saying that a judge of the Grand Court may order a joint trial on such terms and conditions as he may decide to impose, having regard both to the welfare of the young person and the necessity of doing justice in the case. We therefore see that judges do take into consideration the welfare of the youth involved with the older person in committing a crime. This is done through scrutinizing the facts surrounding why such a crime was committed, who played what part, and to then try to mitigate in order to maybe not pose a harsh sentence for both persons involved, especially the younger person. Having said that, I must emphasize, Madam Speaker, that no member of this government or the judiciary wants to have to incarcerate young persons into adult prisons. However, we have to take into consideration the severity of the crime committed. And yes, although juveniles are sometimes incarcerated with adult prisoners, there are still programs and counseling in place for them, albeit it may not be the same sort of institution which is being proposed by the opposition. On that note, Madam Speaker, We have to think outside the box because many crimes committed by young persons may be seen in the eyes of an adult as adult crime, i.e. murder. It can be argued that if a youth was to commit murder, this youth should not just be given a slap on the wrist and sent to a juvenile detention center, that he or she should receive a much harsher sentence and go to prison because he or she took the life of another human. Some may also argue that the child should be able to go to the juvenile center and once they have reached the age of 18, be transferred to an adult prison. Of course, both arguments would depend on the reason as to why the youth committed such serious crime. It could have been because of self-defense. Many may say that mixing the youth with adults may be beneficial to them because they might see it as a wake-up call to get their lives together. They will get a chance to see the men and women who threw their lives away just for crimes they know they should not have committed. Be that as it may, Madam Speaker, we must understand that each individual youth who commits serious crimes and ends up in a prison are looked at on a one-to-one basis. The crime committed is taken into consideration and therefore they are given the proper therapy based on the status of the crime. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, on the motion presented by the opposition, now that I have voiced many concerns of crimes committed by the youths, I totally understand what the motion calls for and must say that it means well and is definitely feasible for the youth of the Cayman Islands. And like I said, the youth are vulnerable and they are sometimes coerced by adults to commit the crimes they do. In fairness to them, yes, such an institution is necessary, but at this precise time, it presents much thought and collaboration on the government's part to take into consideration the pros and cons of putting such a facility into motion in order to meet the opposition halfway. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wishes to speak, I'll ask the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown North, to exercise his right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While I have heard some of the things that the government have said, I have a few rebuttals and things to say. I have heard claims that the Bonaventure is already accurate enough to properly facilitate our youth in Bonaventure. But the thing is, this is a generation of equality, and this is actually Women's Month. This program is only in Bonaventure and not in Francis Borden Home. What happens to the girls? Are they just left out? No. As you see here today, majority of us are girls. Well, they are girls. So we cannot forget about our females. There are some kids who are suffering from mental and trauma, and we are avoiding the main problem. The problem aren't the parents at home or the teachers at school. The problems are the kids. And if we do not focus on our kids, then we can't focus on the parents after. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Premier said something about we are building a juvenile detention center to resemble a prison. My question to that is, would you have something that resembles a prison, or do you want to send your youth to an actual prison? Which is worse? The Premier also said that 73% of recurring crimes...
Point of elucidation, do you give way, sir?
Do you give way to the Honorable Premier?
Yes.
Point of elucidation. I have one question. So are you saying that I said that since there's Bonaventure, I said that if you build a youth detention center, that it would resemble a prison, but it's better to send children to something that resembles a prison than sending them to something that already is a prison? Are you saying that?
No, I am stating the fact that you said that the juvenile detention center we're going to make will resemble a prison. My question to you was, which is worse, send them to an actual prison or have something that actually help them, even though it resembles a prison?
Well, then my question is, as your beautiful...
I asked Honorable Premier to please be seated. Please continue.
Thank you. The Premier also said that 73% of recurring inmates, of recurring prisoners, go through the entire process. So if we did have a juvenile detention center, we wouldn't have so much recurring prisoners. 73%, that's what she said. Let's drop those numbers to 0% or even less, if there it can go. Some suggestions I have heard was to implement boys to men in our private schools or Big Brother, Big Sister, but in all honesty, these programs cannot be implemented into private schools because it's not allowed. The government has also acknowledged—
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Well, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said that we could implement this program, Boys to Men, in the private schools. But I did not say we could implement that. I was giving examples of programs already instilled in the public school.
I will not withdraw my statement due to the fact that I did not state that she said that. I just state there were some suggestions that she made. I'm saying that you can go further to implement these in private schools to actually help those in private schools, but it will not be effective because they cannot go into the private schools. And further response to that, the current programs they have now, such as Boys to Men and Big Brother, Big Sister, does not deal with mental disorders or deal with drug addiction, so it will not be necessary to have those in the first place. These programs at our Bonaventure homes aren't working. If they were working, we would not be in this house today discussing the issue. You distracting me now. Okay. There was a comment made by one of the government members, and they said something about we're going to place mental abuse persons in juvenile detention centers. From my understanding and from what the opposition said, that didn't come from our mouths. So the words that they should be put in our mouths are yes to this motion and not that we say we're going to put mental abuse people in juvenile detention centers. A government member also states that we are putting back our juveniles in the juvenile detention center and that they're going to just indulge back in those crimes. Well, the answer to that is clear. If we had a proper juvenile detention center, we would have change. We wouldn't have recurring or people indulging back in the same crimes. We would have change. So the answer is simple. We need change, and this motion implements a change, and a proper change too. And we did not just say that it will be open for juveniles. We said it will be open for all youths, not just detentional juvenile offenders. What's her position again? Okay. The Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic, Ms. Daniel Garcia, stated that we need to have a foster home to deal with these mental issues. A foster home in Cayman, there's already a foster home in Cayman, and foster homes for our children without parents are not adequate to help these juveniles through the entire program. I'm not reading that. Madam Speaker, I close on this. At the end of my speech, we will go to a vote, and I will be calling a division. And the reason why I will be calling a division— sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to call a point of order.
What is your point of order?
He said that I did not state that. I did not state what you said that I stated about the foster home, about mentally abused people going in a foster home, or whatever it was you said. I did not say that.
Okay.
I can't repeat it word for word. Can you repeat yourself, please?
I will withdraw my statement.
Thank you.
Back to what I was saying. At the end of this, I will call for division when it comes on to the vote. And the reason why I'm going to call a division is because I want the people of the Cayman Islands to know every member's vote. I want them to hear you say no to their youth. I want them to hear that. Are you going to say no to our youth? Are you going to look them in the eye after and say no? Or are you going to go back to your represented districts and say no to them? They will hear you.
Madam Speaker. Point of elucidation, please.
I decline. So with the ending of that, Madam Speaker, I want the government to look past politics and go to your personal views. It is your youth and your country. What are you going to say to them? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, be it now resolved that this Honorable Youth Parliament considers implementing a juvenile detention and youth rehabilitation center for the youth of the Cayman Islands. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye!
Those against, no.
No.
No. The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, can I have a division, please?
Madam Clerk, please take the division.
Honorable Carolyn Reyes.
No.
Honorable LeBron McLean.
No.
Honorable Nathaniel Gonzalez.
No.
Honorable Richard Weber.
No.
Honorable Danielle Garcia.
No.
Honorable Lisette Williams Fernandez.
No.
Honorable Gabriella King.
Aye.
Mr. Thomas Sevick.
No.
Miss Lucy Parchman.
No.
Miss Liz Hyderine Smith.
No.
Miss Catherine Farrington Martinez.
No.
Honorable Rion Porter.
Aye.
Miss Kayla Turner.
Aye.
Miss Zaria Truman.
Aye.
Miss Dana Levy.
Aye.
Mr. Alec Harden.
Aye.
Miss Leah Robinson.
Aye.
Miss Alexandra Rodriguez.
Aye.
Mr. Liam Henry.
Aye.
Mr. Alexander Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Eric Bernard.
Aye.
If it's tied, what do I do? The results of the division is 11 ayes and 10 noes. Private Members Motion Number 1 of 2019, implementation of a juvenile detention and youth rehabilitation center, has passed. That concludes the proceedings for this Honorable 12th Youth Parliament. I will now call on the Honorable Premier to move a motion for the adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I move the adjournment of this Honorable 12th Youth Parliament, signed die. Madam Speaker, before you put the vote on the motion, I would like to express a vote of thanks. Madam Speaker, I would like to give thanks to Almighty God for enabling us to perform the responsible duties of our high office. I would also like to communicate a special thanks to those persons and companies who have helped support this 12th Youth Parliament. I would like to give specific notion to Alfred McLeod of the Cayman Islands Prison Services, who has helped both the government and opposition to gain a better understanding of the rehabilitation issues in Cayman. Paulinda Mendoza Williams and Christine Miller of the Department of Children and Family Services for helping us understand the societal impacts. I thank Claire Hughes and Bill Lamont for educating us towards the plastic issues and the solutions in the Cayman Islands. Furthermore, I would like to thank Sydney Williams of the Bonaventures Boys Home and Mike Adams, former MLA and Minister of Community Affairs, Gender and Housing, for helping us obtain information of the history of such rehabilitation homes in the Cayman Islands. Kurt Tibbetts, former MLA and leader of government business, for educating us on certain rules and procedures of the Parliament. Lastly, I would like to put forth a grand thank you to Nick Hoffman of Harneys for his strategic support to this Youth Parliament program of the Cayman Islands, and an honorable mention to Ms. Zena Marion Chin, Clerk of the Legislative Assembly, Ms. Barbara Connolly, Chairperson of Youth Parliament and elected member of Georgetown South, Mr. David White, elected member of Georgetown West, and Mr. Kenneth Bryan, the elected member of Georgetown Central, for their guidance and for uplifting us and motivating us throughout this program. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the opposition, I would like to also wish a vote of thanks. I know we all tired and want to go home and sleep, but I'm going to make this quick. I want to thank all my opposition members, Kayla, Zaria, Dana, Alec, Leah, Alexander, Liam, Alexander, Eric. I also want to thank the Honorable Gabriella King for not being blinded by his political views and went to say yes for our motion. I also want to say thanks to Mr. Kenneth Bryan, Mr. Alex Sakou for helping us along the way. Thank you to the Speaker. Thanks to Ms. Barbara Connolly for being the chairperson to the 12th and Honorable Youth Parliament. I also want to thank all the parents for coming on. God bless you all. And I want to thank also all the government members for putting up a very good debate. Thank you. And Berna Bush. Thank you.
The motion is that this Honorable 12th Youth Parliament does stand adjourned, sine die. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. This Honorable 12th Youth Parliament has now stands adjourned, sine die.